Welcome into another live edition of Bully Ball on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Steph Sanchez and I will discuss locker room issues. Brian Baldinger said, "Who over Brock Purdy?" And Brock Purdy's contract negotiations seem to have started in the media. Stick around right after this. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Steph Sanchez, a.k.a. Emo Nick Bosa. This is the Bully Bull podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Steph, how are you? And just to let you know before you say anything, no, Mom, I wanted chicken fingers.
It's not a phase, Mom.
It's not a phase, Mom. It's like you don't even know me, Mom.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you.
Have you ever heard of closing the goddamn door? All right, sorry guys.
All right, we're
Steph,
done.
how are you? Yeah, is that what you were doing with your hair? Like, did you already know this was coming?
No. Oh my God, no. That's so funny. Because last week I did say I was doing something different with my hair, but no, not that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of reverted back to, the old thing, but it's still growing out. So
yeah.
TBD.
Yeah. So look, obviously we're starting off with something that's funny, but in that same interview where Nick Bosa let us know that he's a devout, good Charlotte listener, is the fact that he talked about what's going on with this Devondre Campbell thing, which, look, guys, it is what it is. It's taken care of. Thank you, John Lynch, for making a statement to everybody. I feel that this is really covering up the things that we should be talking about, i.e. this team's horrific offensive performance on Thursday night. That's not something we're discussing now because we're discussing Devondre Campbell's actions. But Nick Bosa alluded to the fact that he kind of knew that it was happening before the game started, that the complaining was already starting. And I think that kind of coincides with what Diamador Lenore said about him feeling like that something was going to happen. So it kind of felt like that it was just a vibe throughout the whole locker room. Steph, did you want Nick Bosa to say something before the game, or is just, it's just one of those things where you just let it go?
Yeah, to add a little color to it, I mean, I think Nick Bosa also said that he didn't want to say anything to him. He thought about it, but he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to create a distraction. And remember, this is right before, the game. It is game day. So I think that reasoning made sense. And then also he said he didn't imagine that Devondre Campbell would actually elect to not go into the game and refuse to go into the game, right? I don't think anyone could have predicted that. Like, even if you saw someone complaining, I don't think you would have jumped to the conclusion that that player would then refuse to play in the game. Mm-hmm. And then even when he was asked afterwards, like a follow-up, do you regret not saying anything? Mm-hmm. He said, no, not really, because it seemed like he had kind of made his mind up already, if that was something that he wanted to do. So given all that, like, I understand the reasoning. At the same time, I understand the reasoning of anyone who's upset about Nick Bosa not saying anything, because he has a C on his chest. He is a captain on this team. And I think the expectation is that that comes with a little bit extra responsibility. And, I kind of see Bosa as more so the, like, less vocal leader, but more of a just lead by example kind of guy. I don't think he's, I wouldn't, he doesn't strike me as confrontational in any sort of way. And that's just who he is. But, maybe another captain would have maybe said something, or I'm not sure. I think I see both sides of it. I think in hindsight, it's easy to say, well, you should have said something, but we know the reasoning as to why he didn't.
Yeah. And look, for the most part, we should have seen this coming, because Devondre Campbell has had this sort of reputation being in Green Bay. And then, shout out to Guy Haberman, friend of the program. He alluded to this after the Rams game, in which Devondre Campbell was already saying, I'm surprised I'm splitting snaps. I'm upset right now, but we'll see where it goes. Those aren't the words of someone who's committed to the locker room. Those aren't the words of someone who is a part of the culture. Those are the words of someone who's there to collect the check. And it just never felt like he was a part of whatever you want to call it, the 49ers way, whatever, anything like that. And I think, to your point, saying something to him was probably going to be falling on deaf ears, because this is someone who had already made up their mind about what they were going to do. Although, which is what's hilarious about this, is Devondre Campbell was a placeholder for Dre Greenlaw. And Dre Greenlaw returned. And then Devondre Campbell acted like, you're benching me? Yes. That was the plan, pal. That was like this is not something new. We need you to step in because Eric Kendricks left us and that was plan A. You are a player who's played in this league. We need you to be a veteran player for us for a little while. And whenever Dre Greenlaw returns, you will take your spot on the bench. And for him to act like he didn't understand where that was coming from when that was the ideal plan and just laid out for him. And even if the 49ers didn't tell him, how much are you lacking self-awareness that you didn't realize that when Dre Greenlaw returns that you were going to be sent back to the bench? Is that even something that the coaching staff needs to tell you? So for me, I don't really have too much of an issue with it. I think the way that they handled it is fine. Everything that the team has said afterwards, I've never seen George Kittle more upset at a podium, and I've indirectly covered this team since 2019 outside the building. Any press conference I've ever watched, no matter a loss with George Kittle, has never been that contentious, using words like dumb, ignorant, stupid. That's how this team looked at it, and they handled it the right way. And for me, I understand exactly why you suspended him, so you could recoup some of the money, but nobody's looking to bring in Devondre Campbell. Nobody looked at Devondre Campbell and said, that's something we want in our building. When the going gets tough, he's going to walk off the field, and he's also trash at football. Nobody wants that. Nobody's going to add that to their team in no shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah, really the third choice really for this team at linebacker. Obviously, the first choice would be Dre Greenlaw, the second choice Eric Kendricks, and then finally you're left with Devondre Campbell. So yeah, I agree. The lack of self-awareness, and quite frankly, self-respect, I think, was missing from Devondre Campbell. So yeah, to me, it's a shame because it has distracted everyone from the fact that Dre Greenlaw played a hell of a game.
He did.
And I think that needs to be celebrated. Of course, like I'm waiting to hear what his status is going to be in practice this week. Cause like, I don't know, I'm a little iffy about whether or not he exited because, something wasn't feeling right. Like that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, but they also say he's fine. So we'll see. But, I think we should celebrate the fact that Dre Greenlaw is back, and he looks incredible. Like people were saying, after half of football, give that man an extension, and that says a lot about the energy that he brought onto the field. That is an example of the type of leadership and the type of example that you want in your locker room.
And what's funny is everyone was worried about how Dre Greenlaw was going to look off the Achilles injury.
Yeah.
And 3/4 puts that to bed. I have no worries now. All he has to do now is just be healthy and get back for the next season, and we're good to go. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Dre Greenlaw returns and Fred Warner puts up his best game in a long time. There's no coincidence to that. And everyone else is watching you lay it all out on the line. And now everyone's watching you go out there, and you haven't played, and this is a must-win situation, and for all intents and purposes, your season's on the line, and a guy out there goes out there and lays it out. Heartbeat of the defense. If George Kittle is the heartbeat of the 49ers offense, then Dre Greenlaw is the heartbeat of this defense. And I don't really think that it's particularly close. But again, another thing Devondre Campbell has kind of distracted us from is this piss poor 49ers offense on Thursday night. Like, I'm sorry. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. Look,
please.
The 2024 49ers, that is the game that you look at and you just say, yep, that's them. When the defense throws you a defensive gem like that and they only allow 4 field goals and you only score 6, that's exactly what's going wrong with the 49ers this season. One unit plays very well, the other lets them down. And in this case, 12 points, they've allowed 13 in a game, and that was against the New England Patriots. 12 points against the Rams, who put up 44 points against the Buffalo Bills a week prior. 4 field goals. If I would have told you, Steph, 4 field goals, can you beat the San Francisco 49ers offense with 4 field goals? We would have said, hell no. But the Devondre Campbell stuff has gotten us away from the fact that Deebo Samuel had a bad game. Brock Purdy had a bad game. Kyle Shanahan had a bad game. George Kittle Juwan Jennings was all right, but for all intents and purposes, the really only good player on offense was George Kittle, and he didn't get the ball nearly as much. But the offense was so bad, and it's the fewest yards gained in the regular season under Kyle Shanahan. I think for a little while they had less yards than the NFC title game where they had no quarterbacks, which is inexplicable.
That's
Inexplicable.
crazy.
Rain, snow, hail, I don't care. There's no reason for that. So the Devondre Campbell thing is really, really just pushed the problem that I have with this game is that the offense was an absolute no-show in a must-win game, Steph.
Yeah, and they've been a no-show much of this season, and that's been very disappointing. You know, just a week ago we were talking about, hey, this offense looked great finally. How much of that is going to, carry on to the following week? Zero, none of it, literally none of it carried over. I think also, like, I have an issue with uh the easy button that we talked about being pushed the week prior, right? The screens, the play action, all of that, complimentary football. We didn't see any of that. And I do think, like, to an extent, you do have to have your run game going for those things to be able to work, and the run game just wasn't there either. Run blocking was terrible in this game too. And again, you can't fall back on bad weather. You can't fall back on any injuries, like any other cop out you want to have. Like, it just doesn't apply anymore. Like, I'm tired of all these excuses. There are no excuses for this offense to be looking the way that they have. And there's really no other way to describe what we're seeing than disinterested. And I thought they looked interested against the Bears, maybe the only, like, bad team that was left on their schedule that they could beat. And maybe that's why they got up for that one. But, it didn't translate at all to the following week. And I'm so annoyed because I still see people saying, well, technically the 49ers could still make the playoffs. Maybe if they freaking looked like a team that was ascending, they looked like a team that was improving, that looked like a team that built on the last week. They haven't been able to do any of those things. They haven't improved one thing this season. The only thing that's improved in the last couple of weeks has been the defense. That's it. And thankfully, I think a lot of that has to do with them getting some guys back on that side of the ball. That's helped them. But the offense, like, to me, there aren't enough excuses, or there's no excuses for how they've looked. It's just baffling, honestly.
Yeah, and technically, I could send Taylor Rooks a DM, and she might be able to open it. That's the same chances that the 49ers have at making the playoffs. Technically, right? Anything's possible. But I think it's pushed the 49ers in a spot organizationally where they have to look around and start evaluating going forward, right? You've got to find out what everybody else is on this team. Who's going to be here? Who's not? Who's a part of the problem? Who's a part of the solution going forward? And that's kind of where we are. Football players are going to want to play, as evidenced by George Kittle in 2020 when he came back and the season was kind of lost and he said, no, I'm going to play football. And that's just because of the person that he is. And you can't sit anybody who's fully healthy. But if it's a Fred Warner who's got like a fractured ankle, sit, buddy. Let's get you ready for next year. If it's a Dre Greenlaw that you have to ease him in with snaps, fine. Just do what you have to do. But you have to find a way to start figuring out who these guys are. And you saw at the end of this game that you saw a little bit of that changing. Ricky Pearsall was on the field a little bit more than Deebo Samuel at the end of the game. Deebo was essentially just turned into a kick returner. So you've got to get Ricky Pearsall out there. You've got to figure out where he is. These next 3 games should be more for just evaluation process and just figuring out what you have. So you know what you can do right there in the offseason, whether it's in the draft, free agency, you know what you have. I'd like to see Jacob Cowing a little bit more. I want to see these guys get out there on the field. Again, Steph, you and I are pretty much on the same page.
Yep.
I don't have a problem when rookies make rookie mistakes. I have a problem when veterans make rookie mistakes. And if these rookie mistakes are in the name of development, then hell yeah, I'm on board, right? And you can't lie to yourself. You can't lie to yourself the way that you kind of told us the truth about this team at the trade deadline, where you said, yeah, I don't think there's anybody out there that's going to help this team. We're just going to ride with what we got and figure this out and keep our draft picks. You can't lie to us and you can't lie to yourselves. I think you know where you're at right now. This is it. Just finding out who's a part of this team going forward, who's a part of the problem now, who's a part of the solution moving forward. And this will help you evaluate and send you into the offseason with a clearer picture of how you're going to rebuild this team, retool this team, whether it's fully in the draft or with its free agents. It's right now, this is what the 3 games should be for. I know that 49er fans don't want to hear this because it's pretty much just saying the season's over, which it is. But
yeah,
at this point, I know what all these other guys are. Let's find out what the youngsters are. Let's find out what the other pieces of this roster are going to be going forward.
Like, give me something to be excited about.
Mm-hmm.
I am excited by the opportunity to see some of these younger players, Pearsall and Cowan, a little bit more, see what their skill sets are and how those skill sets fit within the 49ers offense and how that may evolve the 49ers offense going forward, right? Like, I want to see those things. I think we all want to see those things. And, for how much effort they put into getting Debo the ball, this past week, why not put that same effort into Cowan and Pearsall getting the ball in
Mm-hmm.
these next 3 games?
Mm-hmm.
You could do it. It's just a matter of, do you want to? Now the thing is, you already had Debo who is disgruntled, right? If those guys start getting more snaps over him, like,
Mm-hmm.
do we see some fits happen, or just more comments or anything like that? I think you got to understand,
Right.
and we're just talking about self-awareness, right? I think you
Mm-hmm.
got to understand that if you beg for the ball, you get those opportunities and you don't do anything with them. Like, that's a message to yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
you would think.
And I think it doesn't mean just bench Debo, but there has to be more of a complement of snaps for Ricky Pearsall. And
Yeah,
again, you saw it
absolutely.
at the end of the game when Debo was just out there kick returning. And thank God he was, because I started him in one of my fantasy leagues and they actually use kick return yards as like points. And thank God he like pushed me over 10 somehow. I'll take that. But they were putting Pearsall on the field. And again, I don't have an issue with rookies making rookie mistakes. If rookies are making rookie mistakes in games that you need to have, that's one thing. If rookies are making rookie mistakes in games that don't really matter in the name of development, I think that's far greater than placating someone who just has underperformed lately. And we know what you are at this point. I don't think that there's anything to really look at it and say that Debo Samuel's really turning the corner at this point. You can't ask for the ball and then get the ball that way and then have this game plan centric, force feeding almost, if you will. Some people say it's not force feeding, but you know, I don't want to see any game in 2024 where George Kittle isn't the leader in targets. That's just not how
Yeah.
this offense should
Mm-hmm.
work at all. If you look at tight ends around the league, Trey McBride leads the team in targets. Brock Bowers leads the team in targets. Travis Kelce for years leads the team in targets. It doesn't matter about other guys. What's working for the offense? Spam George Kittle. He's been phenomenal. He was the one making plays, and then you go from there. So the game plan, and this is where we're going to talk about Kyle, the game plan being so centric on Debo, like getting him the ball immediately on the first play. And,
Yeah.
they threw a pass to him out of the backfield, which I thought was a little bit more creative. Like he actually ran a route, like almost like Christian McCaffrey, right? Okay. But the play that you needed to make obviously was the one that's like the house call, that's a drop and everything as well too. It's just, you can't go out there, talk that cash shit, and then when they ask you to go out there and do it and give you the ball, perform that way. And that's when you'll just like, at this point, you've got to recognize who you are. You've got to recognize what the team is doing, and you've got to see Ricky Pearsall at this point, because I'm fine with his development, and if he's making mistakes, as long as it's in the name of development.
And Kyle has to realize that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that's what we see. We've been asking for that for, like, I feel like half the season now, Jay. And now it's finally at the point where there isn't an excuse as to why you shouldn't. The excuse
Mm-hmm.
before was, well, there is a chance still that we can make the playoffs. Well, now that is pretty much done in my eyes, and it should be in everyone else's eyes as well. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just see what we got. That's what it needs to be about going forward. And we've seen it pay off for some other younger players that have gotten the opportunity due to injury. Even Isaac Rendo, Isaac Rendo has looked better with each game that he's been in there. Albeit this past game, he was a little banged up, but I think we've seen improvements in him. So who's not to say that we can't see the same in some other guys in these next 3 games? So hopefully that's what we see. But on the topic of offense and underperforming, I think we got to look at the leader of this offense, right? And that would be Brock Purdy. And I think anytime that an offense looks this bad, you have to look to the quarterback and what's going on with him. And I think much of this season has been a disappointment for Brock, especially compared to the way that he looked in 2023. And there's been a lot of circumstances that I think have taken this offense and maybe Brock out of his element, out of his comfort zone a little bit. And is that part of the issue with Brock, right? Like, does he need conditions to be perfect? Remember, that's what everyone kind of argued about last season, and we're like, no. And then we finally saw some of those things happen, injuries on offense, things not completely being tailored to Brock Purdy's strengths and it not really going well for him. So this season, it's been hard to argue against that, right? I just want to know your take, because we're starting to hear a lot of discourse about Brock, and it's only going to get louder until that extension is done. I'm sure even after the extension is done, it will be loud. But what's your kind of take on Brock Purdy right now and how he's looked this season?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in weeks past that, I just kind of wanted the 49ers to strip things down a little bit more and get back to basics. And I think when you say that, it becomes somewhat negative. And I didn't mean that. What I meant is you can't ask someone who is not comfortable or doesn't have the physical skills to transform their game. And the good coaches and the good players understand what their limitations are and play to strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if it's a cover corner and he can't cover man, then you need to give him someone who you can help or mix in zones. Just don't leave him out there to dry. A lot of this offense went away from play action. A lot of this offense went away from quicker throws, timing throws, and a lot of that has to do with sometimes separation, all those things, obviously. Okay, but what I noticed, and I hope you guys watched this Amazon game on Prime Vision, because you would have been yelling at the TV as I did. This interception that he throws to Jawan Jennings, there was no lane for it. There was no, I'm yelling, no, there's no
Second
lane.
and 10.
Yeah.
Like,
in field goal range. In
yeah,
field goal
yep,
range,
yep.
right? This is the part where people get mad. Game manager, right? Manage the game. 2nd and 10, you're down 3, you're in field goal range. You cannot do that. That's managing the game. That's not a negative. Every quarterback has to, one way or another, manage the game. He is not some sort of game manager. When it gets thrown around, it's just people just lose their minds. But in that scenario, that was poor game management. I don't know what you're looking at here. You are literally bracketed. And it's Jawan Jennings who can't get down the field with speed that way. So you're watching this on Prime Vision and you're seeing that there's no throw and he throws it. And you're yelling, no, and it gets intercepted. The problem is when you are physically limited, when your arm isn't strong enough for you to see the read, maybe get off it for half a second, then get back and then throw, your decision-making has to be perfect. And that's the part that Brock has to excel in that other people don't. And this is where the crux of the argument comes in with those elite guys, right? Well, you don't have the show-stopping arm. There's more to quarterback play than that. But in Brock's case, he has to be perfect with decision-making, because if you don't make the right decision and you are late with the football and you don't have the arm to compensate for the late decision or the good coverage, that's when you're going to find yourself in these troubles. And that is going to be the crux of this argument. Now, speaking of all of that, Brian Baldinger goes on 95.7 The Game today and says, I would move Brock for Sam Darnold. And I want to preface this by saying I think he means for the amount of money, right? For the amount of money. Let's not get it twisted. Sam Darnold has made himself a ton of money this season, a ton. When you start looking around, you don't see an obvious spot for him to go to. I don't think he's going to stay in Minnesota, because I think they're fine with going with J.J. McCarthy and Daniel Jones. It's time for them to have a cheap quarterback room and make sure that they go and they put numbers around, they put people around them. Where is the place that Sam Darnold could go? Does Mike Tomlin, move away from Russell Wilson or Justin Fields for Sam Darnold next year? Would that be an upgrade? Like, there's not many spots that you look at and you say, that's a spot for him. The Jets, the Giants, I don't know. The Cowboys aren't moving off their guy. The Eagles aren't moving off their guy. Washington's not moving off their guy. So, of course, the Sam Darnold discourse is going to spin itself around back here. But Brian Baldinger says he would do that, Darnold for Purdy. But I think it was more about the money. And if you're going to pay Brock top 5 money, you can pay Sam Darnold top 12, top 15 money and get the same thing. I don't believe that, but I'm shocked that Brian Baldinger is saying this. He's been a little off with some of his takes a little bit lately, huh?
Just a little. I almost feel like he's getting too close to like the 49ers and just watching them that he's starting to think like us, like, and that's not good. So yeah, I mean, this one was a bit of a head scratcher. I do agree. He's probably thinking of it from the money standpoint, and value really is what it comes down to. I think Sam Darnold has raised his value just based on what he was able to do in Minnesota. I saw someone say that Brock Purdy, if you put him in Minnesota, he'd probably do the same thing or look better than Sam Darnold has this season. I don't think that's crazy to say. Like, I could see that. I think Minnesota has a good track record of putting their quarterbacks in very favorable positions. It helps to have the best wide receiver in the league there as well. But, you know, I think there's a lot of nuance to the Brock Purdy conversation. And the problem that I'm having with people throwing their takes around and judging other people's takes is that you say one thing and that's it. Like, that's the side you're on. And that's not true. Like, I think I've looked at Brock Purdy this season, and I think we all have, and we say, like, he hasn't been very good. It doesn't mean he sucks. Like, that doesn't mean that I'm saying don't pay this guy, you know? I think from that standpoint, I do think the 49ers have already made the decision that they're going to pay him. We have already seen those reports multiple times at this point. So that is going to happen. I guess the question is, like, how much they're going to pay him. And that's the part that I think is already like that. Those wheels are already spinning, you know, as to how much that's going to come down to, because I think even this week alone, we've seen a little bit of some back and forth headlines as to what Brock Purdy is going to get paid. Like, Tom Pelissero said that Brock Purdy's, you know, going to seek a top contract in the quarterback market. And then a couple of days later, you have Greg Papa, you know, saying that he doesn't see that. And I forget the number he said. I think it was like, was it 50 million or plus or something like that? Like, he didn't see him getting top of the market. So is that the 49ers and Brock's representation speaking to each other through headlines? I don't know, but we know that these things happen, and it's going to be happening more and more until that contract gets signed. So, you know, I think Brock has every right to look for a top of the market contract. I think, and we always encourage players to try to go for that if they can. And, you know, I think at the same time, I think the 49ers have every right to make some arguments against that as well. And I think this season has given them some ammo to do that. If he didn't have the season that he did this year, I don't think we can argue against him like being top of the market in QB money, right? But now there's some things that have happened, and it's like, well, you struggle in rain games or bad weather games. You know, you need all these pieces around you to be successful. You need the play calling to be perfect to be successful, you know, all these things. So I think we're seeing the arguments unfold in real time, and I'd support those arguments as well, to be quite honest with you. But I'm not on the boat of don't pay Brock. Here's what I think. I'm going to lay it all out right now, and this probably isn't the last time that I'm going to have to say this, but I think you give Brock an extension for however many years, but you structure it in a way that you could get out of it some point in the future if you feel like you need to. In the meantime, I also think that you should consider drafting a quarterback in every draft, just because that's a good process. And you never know what can happen when you pick up someone in a draft, right? Look at Brock Purdy. You know, 49ers were able to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance because of Brock Purdy, basically. So, I think that would be a good process. You sign Brock, you know, you can win with him, sure, in certain conditions, but the 49ers are well equipped to provide those conditions, I think, for Brock. So I have no problem with them signing him to an extension. Continue to look for a longer term replacement if you can. And here's the other thing too. Sorry to go on a soapbox, but this is the other thing that I get really pissed off about, and I'll get to the super chat, is the fact that everyone always compares every quarterback to the elite quarterbacks, and there's only like what 3, 4, 5 in the league. Like that's it. And so in their mind, you shouldn't pay any quarterback that isn't those 5 players. And it's like, well, teams have to operate somehow. Teams need quarterbacks. And again, Brock Purdy is a quarterback you can win with. You also know you can lose with him. I think this season is his floor. At least that's what we know. 2023 being his ceiling. So you hope you could get him back to 2023. But all that to say, there's a lot of nuance to the conversation. Obviously, he's not an elite quarterback. He's never going to be. But obviously, also, the 49ers aren't going to find an elite quarterback picking like 15 in this draft and being as good as they have been. They're not going to have a top 5 pick. Who knows when they will have another top 5 pick in this league. So, yeah, that's where I go. Rob said, anything north of $50 million for Purdy, I'm going to be out on John Lynch. John Lynch is going to be on the hot seat this offseason as it is. I don't agree that he's going to be on the hot seat. Like, why? How? what is the reason that John Lynch would be on the hot seat? I think there's been some bad decisions made by this regime, and they've been lucky enough to I think kind of recoup some of that with Brock Purdy, and like it hasn't really hurt them as much. But I mean, I think there's plenty for John Lynch to hang his hat on, and he's not going to be on the hot seat, nor is Kyle Shanahan for the same reason, because they're like a package deal. Jed has extended them. I think that tells you everything.
Yeah, I think the real argument here is the quarterback pay scale. And it only goes like this. Quarterbacks who have been paid market value, the high up guys, everybody, right? Tua, Dak, Goff, all those guys, right? And there's like maybe 3 mid-level guys. And funny enough, it's Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold who are in the same draft, and Geno Smith. And everyone else has rookie quarterbacks who are about to get paid. The Steelers are probably your only example of them having a $2 or $3 million quarterback room. But for the most part, it's top heavy. It's the 50, 55, $60 million guys. It's a few mid-level guys, and it's all rookies. So the pay scale, where does this fit? Does Brock put himself in a position where he has to be paid like Baker and Darnold and Geno Smith? Or does Brock, say, look at Tua, look at this guy, look at that guy. I've done all those, right? So the real problem here is the pay scale, because it's all these guys up at the top. There's like these few mid-level guys, and the rest are just rookie quarterbacks who eventually are going to get paid, right? And there's no middle ground anymore, like at all. It's either you're going to take market value, or unless you're going to be like a guy like Kirk Cousins who just gets $40 million, whatever, for 2 years, fully guaranteed, whatever it is Atlanta gave him. And then everybody else is just rookies. This is the part. And the other problem is this. The expectations that come to you with the pay, right? When a $60 million or $55 million quarterback is paid, it usually means that there are going to be pieces that leave your team offensively or defensively. But you're asked to cover up those warts. You're asked to lift the offense. You're going to be evaluated completely different. And I don't think that's fair to Brock Purdy either. I don't think that's fair to him, if that is the case. So this is the issue. It's less about where you believe he should be paid, because there's only 3 or 4 guys that make this mid-level money. Again, Darnold, Geno, and Baker. Everyone else gets paid market, and then it's all rookies. So this is what's going to be the crux of the argument, and what's going to be the talking point the full way through, is what you're going to do when he says, look at Trevor Lawrence, look at Goff, look at Tua, look at this guy, look at this guy. I have comparable numbers. I was, top 3 MVP 2 years ago. But you might be insulting him if you say, "Hey, we want you in this Baker range," when, like, that may not be where he wants to be. So this is what's going to make this discussion so loud, and the fact that the money is going to dictate how he's evaluated. And I don't think that's necessarily as fair as all that, because I don't think any quarterback can do it with nobody aside from, again, 3-4 guys. Like, again, it's Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow, right? 4. That's it. Those are your elite guys. 4. Everybody else from week to week, we can move up and down. But the pay scale is going to be the reason that this gets contentious, because it's just all these top end guys. It's 3 mid-level guys, and it's all rookies. There's no real little like middle ground for him to sit in right now. And I don't blame him if he says that's what I want.
But I mean, the valuation thing based on how much he's paid, sure, but like, if you got paid, like, would you even care? Like, his agent wouldn't care. Like,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fans that'll say, "See, he's not worth this.
Oh yeah,
see, he's not." Like, it's not him. Brock doesn't care what we're saying. It's
right.
how the talking heads are going to say, "Wow, a $60 million quarterback is playing like this," or whatever, or like, he made this mistake. That's the evaluation process that's going to skew things, because it's already been skewed.
It's gonna be endless too. Like, and it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, we've seen the team go down a similar path with Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think two things are true here in the difference between them. Obviously, we know Brock Purdy is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Even now, even with this 2024 season, he's still better than Jimmy Garoppolo in my eyes. Now, obviously, the difference too is you have a bigger sample size with Brock Purdy, which is a good thing. The bad thing is, like, the sample size is so vast. Like, I feel like we got such a good season from Brock, and then now we've got like this, I don't want to say horrible, but it's like it's a pretty bad season, all things considered. And maybe it's because I'm comparing it to 2023, but it's just hard to get a read on what's his like middle ground. Who is he? Like, which one of these two quarterbacks is he?
Hold on. I'm not comparing Tua to Brock. Tua's at the top of the league. Tua's at the top of the league in salary. How did you guys miss that so easily? No one's comparing Tua to Brock. Oh, yeah. What you're comparing is the salary. Tua's at the top of the league in what he gets paid. And why wouldn't Brock Purdy look at him and say, "I'm better than him. I should make that amount of money"? How did you guys lose the point that badly? Like, are you not listening, or are you purposefully misinterpreting my words for what? For a click, or for a pull up on your comment here? Well, like, are you guys insane? Go ahead, Steph.
No, I was just saying, like, the difference for Brock from what we've seen, I think, is it's big enough a gap where I'm having a hard time figuring out what he should get paid. And again, like, it's not our decision. It's not our money. We say that all the time, but, like, we're here to have an opinion. We're here to have our takes. So I just, like, I'm having a hard time. I definitely don't think he should be at the top of the market. At the same time, I do understand that's how the quarterback market works. Like, next quarterback up usually is going to get paid the next highest, usually. Again, unless he's like a veteran in the league. But in this case, Brock's not. So, yeah, I think he'll probably, I would want him in the 50 million range, but I don't know. Do you have an idea in your head, Jay?
I don't. Again, just because of the scale and who's paid. Dak's getting 60 million. Tua's getting a lot of money. Goff is getting a lot of money. And they play similar roles in their offense as point guards. And why wouldn't Purdy look at that and say, "I have done just as much as they have the last 2 years. I have done," like, this is the thing. It's your issue isn't with what Brock is going to ask. Your issue is what other guys are making who are in comparison to Brock. And Brock has every right to look at everybody and say, "Yeah, it's the same thing with Ayuk, right? We had the same issue with Ayuk. When it's exploding and the cap is going up and the numbers going up, he's looking around. Jalen Waddle, I have more numbers than you. Jalen Waddle, I block better than you, right? Like
Mm.
that's the thing. It's not the issue that you guys are having right now is not about what he's going to want. It's what his production has compared to the people that are at top of the market that he can compare and say, I was just as good as this guy. I was just as good as this guy. Why don't I ask for that amount of money? The issue is it's all top heavy. It's 3, 4 mid-level guys, and then it's all rookies. There is no real like middle ground, right? The Baker deal is something that, like just Baker could take, and Baker's doing good. That the Darnold thing was kind of a prove it thing. Geno, the same thing. But there's no middle ground for these quarterbacks, and this is just the way it's going. Like it's not something that you're mad about because like, oh, why is Brock asking for this much? It's look at who's getting this amount of money and why shouldn't he ask for that? Always go get your bag.
Yeah.
It's less that than anything. And I think that's the part where people are getting upset, and it doesn't make sense because look around at what everybody else is getting, and why wouldn't he?
And he's been playing on a discount this whole time.
100%.
So like, and we've seen that argument too. It's like, what will Brock take a hometown discount or something like that? Knowing that he needs some of these pieces around him, he's already taken the discount. The discount was his rookie deal. Now pay up. Like, all right, we got another super chat here from Rob, who, by the way, is not our Rob, but this is not to be confused. Rob Amen, thank you for the super chat. He says, what I think could help Kyle and Brock in 2025 is to make Clay Kubiak the offensive coordinator, to have extra eyes to help Brock adapt to the defenses that play man. I don't think the 49ers need that. I think Kyle needs to be that, right? Like, I mean, Kyle needs to have all the adjustments and needs to have Brock in those favorable positions. And when defenses have, figured out what you want to do and try to take that away, I think you need to zig, and that's what I think that's part of the like, we haven't seen much of that. I don't think from Kyle this season. And, I think Brock also, I think they both need to be better. I'll just put it that way. They don't need Clay Kubiak to be offensive coordinator.
Mr. J, you're just not making any sense, blood. Like, I'm sorry that this is like so far beyond you. I'm gonna keep on with the show and everything as well too. Look, it's not a matter about what we would pay them. It doesn't matter what we would pay them. This is why they have Parag and they have their cap people to do what they need to do. Like that's their job. That's not our job, right? What we would pay them. It doesn't matter what we want. It doesn't matter what we want to pay. It matters what he's asking for in relation to other people who have similar production and have done things that he's done in this league, and what the 49ers are willing to give him. The one thing that I will say that they need to do is they need to start this process now. They need to start this process now. Like right after the season's over, start to getting where you feel like this number has to be. Don't wait. Don't wait until it gets into August. Don't drag this out in your training camp.
Oh, yeah.
You've got to figure out, you've got to get to work on this right now. You have to get to this right now. Like right now. And you can't wait. You can't let it go into training camp, anything like that. You have to figure out, is he going to play on this fourth year? What is it going to take? What's the middle ground? And if the 49ers have to say, hey, look, we're not comfortable paying you that much, maybe go try to find it somewhere else, just so it'll send him back and say, look, you didn't get what you were looking for. I don't know, but it needs to start early. That's the one thing that I can say. That needs to start right away.
And there needs to not be other quarterbacks who get their deals done before Brock, preferably because we've seen how that could bite the 49ers in the ass. And I could see a scenario in which if the 49ers wait too long, Sam Darnold gets a deal before Brock does, and Brock is like, I need more than him. Mm-hmm. I mean, and as he should, right? But the 49ers have to make sure it doesn't even get to that point. Get this done fast.
Yeah, and that's it. Just start now. And that's what I think a lot of the stuff that you're hearing where Pelissero says, oh, he wants top of the market. And Greg Papa's like, well, I don't think he's going to get 50. Seems like the contract negotiations are starting to play out through the media because Greg Papa's a 49ers, employee. Pelissero is a guy who's tapped in, who's probably talking to Brock's agent. This is where it's starting. And we've seen the contract negotiations with Brandon Ayuk and other players play out in the media-wise, now that there's 3 games left and the season's essentially over, this is where it's starting to play out. And we're starting to see it now with just the media games and everything as well, too, and expect it to continue. And again,
Oh no, I was just gonna say I'm not surprised by the fact that we're getting these. Like it happens every off season, right? These conversations through the media, through headlines. But I thought it was certainly a choice for Brock's agency, assuming Tom Pelissero's report came from that, for him to put this out after like the 49ers loss on Thursday and the way that they lost 191 total yards of offense. That was certainly a choice. So just an observation.
Yeah, and again, this is going to play itself out longer and longer. Obviously, again, it's going to come down to what Brock wants, what the 49ers are comfortable with, and we just got to see how this is going to play out. Again, it's looking more and more, again, like if you just look at this league, it's top heavy, really, really top heavy numbers, a few middle guys, and all rookies. The scale is just, it's in relation to the production that Brock has been able to put up in doing the same thing. So you can't be surprised if Brock Purdy says, I want as much as this player. I want as much as this guy because I've done just as much, if not more. So it's whatever they want and whatever the 49ers are comfortable with. Whatever we're comfortable with doesn't really matter because we don't know how to work the cap. We don't know who's going to be here. We don't know who's not. That's all stuff that they have to figure out, which goes back to our point. In these last 3 games, play the guys that are there so you can figure out who's going to be here next year, who you can let go, and who you feel comfortable moving on with, because it's all tied to this whole Brock Purdy thing. Justin Fields a shot. I don't know. I just feel like Kyle would hate having Justin Fields there. He just not his the inaccuracy. Yeah, the inaccuracy would drive him nuts, man. I mean, I championed for him, at 3. I think that's who we all wanted at 3. But he would drive Kyle nuts. Like Kyle would lose it on him.
I do think that the 49ers probably bring in a strong QB2, as they have tended to do, in the last couple years anyway. So, and don't be surprised, again, to hear reports of 49ers being linked to other quarterbacks, because I do think that's also part of negotiation tactics. Kirk, who's also had a terrible year, will absolutely be thrown in the mix just as a name floating around. But I think it'll all be purposeful to try to get some negotiation discussions happening.
What a difference a year makes. From a year ago, we're like, oh, wow, it's just really nice to have our guy and not have any quarterback discussions to being right back in the middle of it.
We enjoyed it while it was good.
While it lasted. Right? Yeah. Look, just to be clear, I'm not out on Brock Purdy at all.
Right.
At all. Not out on him. Not ready to give up on him. Not ready to just toss him aside. Let me say that. That's as clear as I can be about that. No way to conflate those words and change anything, right? But as long as there are names like Rodgers, Cousins, any of those names out there, and this contract negotiation is out there in the air, expect to hear those names. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that that's what the 49ers are thinking, but everyone is just throwing out, things for clicks and everything. And as long as there is no long-term deal in hand, people are just going to run with that stuff and try to drum up drama. That's the thing. And I don't want Rodgers. I don't want Cousins. I'm not saying that. I don't want Mac Jones. I don't want any of those guys. But as long as they're out there, people are going to continue to throw their name out there and use them as examples.
I think the 49ers themselves will be like, there will be some people in that building throwing those names out there again, like purposefully trying to get some discussions happening, trying to get the other side to react. It's going to happen. We are warning you about it now. Don't act like it's our first time, in a few months when we're wondering why those names are being thrown out and we're getting all pissed off. Don't panic. Don't panic.
Yeah. It's just as long as these names are going to be out there, they're always going to be brought up. I think the problem with Rodgers is he's going to want too much control. Kyler never let that happen. I think the problem
Can you imagine?
Right. I think the problem with Cousins is he's diminished severely, severely. And even when he was good, a few years ago, 49er fans would have said no to that. So yeah, it's as long as those names are out there, people are just going to keep throwing them out there. Like, like, hey, could be, like, look out for this, look out for that. I've heard he's got them on the short list. So, the Brock situation kind of has to play itself out. And then all of a sudden, like, we'll see what happens when it comes to this, but they're definitely going to be bringing that up.
Never a dull moment.
Oh,
Never a
man.
dull moment with this team.
Yeah.
They make sure that us content creators always have something to talk about. Bless their hearts.
The 49ers are the content creators. We're the ones that are just trying
Yeah.
we're just trying to keep fishing the boat, like with our oar, hitting them and everything as well too.
Yeah, they're the real content creators. But yeah, I mean, let's just have fun, the rest of the season, man. Let's try to touch grass at the same time. Don't let this team get you down. They've already done enough to disappoint us. Let's get excited about watching some of these younger players, seeing what this team may or may not look like in 2025, who's staying, who's going, all that good stuff.
I just hope all the 49ers fans have fun. That's it. That's all I want for the rest of the year. Just 3 more games, guys. I know that it sucks to say that, but yeah. All right, I guess that'll do it for this episode of Bully Bowl on the Ghost Data Podcast Network. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video on YouTube. Make sure you follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Follow me on Twitter at JasonAponte2103. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to anywhere that you get your audio podcast to the Ghost Data Podcast Network. A ton of great content all week. Even if Rob's voice was gone, 49ers in 5 didn't happen today. It'll probably happen tomorrow. But thank you guys as always. For Steph, for Jay, we're out here.
Peace.